Welcome to OState Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad you decided to tune in. Fans, today we have a very, very, very special guest. Jeff Johnson of OState Illustrated joins OState Daily. So, hey, Jeff, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to bring you in and get to talk to you.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, man. Well, this dates back all the way to 1997. I've been on the old OState.com many different times, OState Illustrated, all of that. Take us back to the roots of this, what you got going on right now, and what people, if they wanted to come to your site, how they would do that.
Yeah, the quick story on it, 97, senior year at OSU. I was on the 6.5-year plan, but took a senior level entrepreneurship class as part of a business degree. Had to do a business plan. It was a group project. Didn't really have any great ideas from the group. I threw this out of doing a website covering Oklahoma State sports and recruiting, and we did the project, did everything asked, wound up getting a C on the project, and the professor said, you did everything in the business plan you were supposed to, look good as far as the business plan goes, but the problem I have here is this will never work. This is not a business. It can't work. And so, I didn't necessarily take that to heart. Proceeded to start doing some basic coding, probably in the summer of 98. Got some help to get a message board kind of thrown together. And that's where it basically started. It was more or less just a message board. And technically, I guess it was a website with a message board, but not a whole lot to it. Rivals came calling not long after that got going. That pretty quickly after we signed on fell victim to the .com. Well, I lost myself there.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Fell victim to the .com bubble bursting. Rivals went bankrupt. Shannon Terry, who is the CEO and founder of On3 now, had also been on Rivals with his group of sites called Alliance Sports. Kind of bought up the pieces and put it back together in late spring of 2001. And from that point forward, we were rivals all the way until On3 acquired Rivals this summer and moved over and have been there ever since. Pretty happy with it. I mean, the talent they put together at the national level to bring coverage to college football fans is really pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. Brett McMurphy, who's an OSU guy, that's a big one. A lot of guys like that. As far as the forums go, which is big. I mean, more than anything, we are a message board site. We're a community. That's always been my focus. Certainly, we cover recruiting. We do stories, things like that. But the message boards are huge. Fortunately, On3 used the same basic message board software that we had been using on Rivals for a number of years now. So that worked out pretty good, for people that came over with us from Rivals. It wasn't a big change, and so far it's been pretty great.
All right, so you said you dive into a little bit of everything, the message boards and all that. One of your big things that you do, though, is recruiting, transparency. I don't follow recruiting hardly at all. I just don't have time to do it. It takes an incredible amount of time. So I certainly appreciate your dedication. So let me say this. We always hear, even from Eddie Sutton and all the guys that have had a lot of success here, Mike Gundy said it a lot, Stillwater is hard to recruit to. Have you seen that in almost your 30 years? Is that an accurate statement?
It used to be, for sure. Pop up there on me. Used to be, going back 20, 25 years, maybe even 20. A lot of that had to do with facilities. And over that 25-year period we're talking about, Gallagher obviously changed a whole lot and changed first. Then Boone Pickens Stadium getting built up to what it is. Definitely more of a destination as far as facilities go. The city of Stillwater has grown a fair bit, compared to what it used to be, certainly back in the Eddie Sutton days and maybe start of the Gundy era. So it's a little more attractive there. And then you had the airport factor in that, you can get a direct flight to Stillwater now out of Dallas or other big places. All of that has changed over time. And then on top of it, I don't know if it's the portal, NIL, or just modern progress. But kids today don't have a big deal going to a school across the country from where they grew up or wherever. So that's certainly been a big change you've seen, and made it easier to recruit to OSU, to Stillwater. And then the city itself has grown a fair bit as well. So all those things kind of make the, I'm going to say excuse, but I don't want to phrase it that's come off in a bad way for Coach Sutton or Gundy, having said that in the past. But a lot of the excuse part of it, or the reasons probably a better way to say it, as opposed to an excuse. But some of the reasons have certainly changed that used to make it hard to recruit to Stillwater.
So we always heard that Coach Gundy under-recruited here to Stillwater. In your time, did you see that, or did you just see that maybe he recruited to a fit, or did you think maybe Mike Gundy under-recruited here, and what do you think the recruiting ceiling is for OSU football?
I think Mike fell into a pattern that worked for him. You go back about 15 years, that 2008 to 2012, of course, that was a peak for OSU football as well. They went after the 4 and 5 star kids. Didn't necessarily get a whole bunch of them, but they did. But at some point after that, kind of fell into what worked for him, and it obviously worked really well for a long time. You'd see an OSU class that was rated in the 40s. That's pretty typical. Mid 30s to mid 40s was pretty normal Mike Gundy class over the last 15 years. And you would think, man, you can't win at a big level with that. But we have an awful lot of evidence that, Gundy did win a lot over that time. A lot of it had to do with evaluation, finding guys that were maybe overlooked or undervalued. There's a long list of those, such as James Washington, Trace and Wallace, the Wallace twins, guys like that maybe were overlooked and could develop. Certainly with NIL and the portal in particularly, that's a tougher road these days, because some of those guys that you're taking, and with an understanding, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to develop them to where they're able to get on the field for you, and maybe guys these days don't want to wait that long. So that's certainly changed in this new era. And I think it was one of the many things that kind of piled up on Gundy, that he had some systems that worked really well for him. Didn't necessarily love the idea of the portal or NIL and all that. So a lot of things changed and made it tough for him to succeed doing the things he had gotten him to that high level of success we saw over the years.
Yeah. So what do you think Mike Gundy has meant to OSU in particular, and how did you think the admin handled the separation?
I mean, you can't say anything about Mike Gundy and the run he had over the last 21 years, other than it did a lot of great things for Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State obviously did a lot of great things for Mike Gundy as well. Made a lot of money, got facilities built and that type of thing. So certainly for a long time, it was a really great situation, great relationship. And things just kind of fell off over the last couple of years. Kind of touched on it a little bit, not really embracing NIL and or the transfer portal. I think when we look back at it 10 years from now, and things are going to keep changing on that front, I think. But when we look back, we'll say that was kind of the undoing, was being slow to adapt, slow to adopt, wanting to do it a particular way that was maybe a little different than everybody else in the country who was approaching it. just kind of snowballed. And at some points, if you coach long enough, you're going to have a bad year. You're going to get fired. People are going to be upset with you, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the separation, obviously, we'll see how that ends in the long run. So far, I mean, it hasn't been too ugly. It hasn't been great, but I think Chad did a great job in the hiring process, finding the right guy. Talk about what you think about the hiring process itself and Eric Morris.
The process, Chad said from the get-go, is going to be high integrity. What he meant by high integrity was we're not going to be talking about it.
Yeah, right.
We're going to respect other institutions the coaches we're looking at and do it the right way. And part of that right way is not having rumors here, there, and everywhere, leaks, etc. And in this day and age, that's almost impossible.
It is.
And I'll say Chad Weiberg did it as close to perfect as far as all that goes, the high integrity portion of it, as it could possibly be done. And the search in general, I think it was incredibly thorough. I think OSU was pretty surprised at some of the interest that was maybe out there that didn't necessarily anticipate. But it's a good job. The facilities are fantastic. Oklahoma State's have stepped up to support the program. So there was a lot of interest there. And I think at the end of it, from the available candidates that OSU legitimately could have gotten, there were a handful, such as John Summerall, Tulane, who Eric Morris is going to play Friday night. He was SEC or bust.
Yeah.
He wound up getting the Florida job, but he just stuck at Tulane for another year if so much hadn't changed on that front in the SEC. So outside of those guys that just really weren't attainable, Lane Kiffin, you weren't going to get a Lane Kiffin.
Right.
Outside of those that were kind of SEC or Big Ten, I don't know that they really looked at anybody that was Big Ten or bust, but not going to get those guys kind of right off the bat. I don't know that he could have wound up with a better hire than the one he got in Eric Morris. It's a fit. He's proven it, battling at lower levels, than Incarnate Word program that was basically fresh to D1 and not very long from being in existence, I guess.
Yeah,
but,
right.
What he's done this year at North Texas speaks for itself and is extremely impressive.
Yeah. So from what you see, I know you were very surprised whenever they started pulling offers back from previous commitments. I mean, that's something that you stated that you really, you weren't necessarily criticizing it. You're just like, not sure I've ever seen this before. So kind of talk about that and what you think the recruiting strategy will be for Eric Morris and what type of recruiter he will be to Stillwater.
Yeah, on that, kind of hadn't seen that. A lot of it has to do with the day and age we're in. The way things have been set up in terms of dates, signing dates, the playoff, portal window, which I think is a little better this year, not having the one early in December and then one later in spring. Moving it to January is an improvement, but still not ideal. And then you've got the coaching carousel, which this one in particular just absolutely went nuts.
Yeah.
It was crazy to see. I think Mike was the third guy at a P4 program fired, and you kind of thought, well, that's a lot for September. But yeah, it's probably going to calm down. And no, it really didn't. It just kept going. That more jobs came open and so forth. And that just throws a wrench in everything, on the recruiting front. Eric Morris in particular, but all these other guys that wound up taking jobs elsewhere had their own recruiting classes built. Yeah. And, and he took the job. He was named officially 8 days before signing day. That's a short window.
Yeah.
My kind of amazement on that was there were some pretty decent guys on that commit list that wound up not on the commit list. We'll put it that way. That close to signing day, it's tough. There's certainly an argument to be made that, yeah, it's tough, but it's a business now. Players are getting paid. It's business, and that's tough. It stinks, but it is what it is. I will say on the recruiting side, compared to established players, be that guys that are already on your team, guys you're pulling in from the portal, incoming freshmen in terms of NIL or revenue share, generally, and there are exceptions, you know, the 5-star, top 25 in the country type guys, that's a different deal. But your average recruiting class, those guys are not pulling that much money. So while it is a business, it's still a lot like it was on the high school recruiting front. I'll say it that way. So it was a different approach, and you know they went with it. Not a big surprise that the class that came to be was kind of made up of a handful of guys that either were going into signing day or previously had been committed to OSU. Some of those definitely, I actually was working on a breakdown before we started this. A majority were previously North Texas verbals that flipped over right before signing day or actually on signing day. And then a handful of other flips. They got one from Baylor, got one from Wake Forest. Caden Jones from Jinx, technically a flip from Kansas, but was also a guy that previously had been committed to OSU. But as far as the makeup of the class, that's what you would expect. It is a group of guys that had previously been committed to Oklahoma State, either decommitted or a handful of guys never wavered. Braden Presley, you know, was a guy that Mike Gundy got fired, and he wasn't listening to anybody else, just waiting to see who his new coach was going to be. Then a good number that flipped over from the North Texas verbal commitment list going into yesterday, and that's totally to be expected. You know, those are guys in Eric Morris's seat that you've vetted, you've evaluated them, scouted them, know what they're about as people. So yeah, they fully expected that was going to be the case, and that's the way it worked out in the end yesterday.
So in the 8-day window, obviously that's difficult, but you had a head start in terms of, you mentioned the guys that were committed to OSU, then UNT that flipped, and a couple of other guys. But in that 8-day window, all 3-star recruits, that's not going to wow an Oklahoma State fan base that maybe doesn't follow it as closely as you do. So would you say that they did well, they just kind of did how you expected, or how would you rate how they did in that 8-day window?
Well, I've made a lot of people mad by saying it's not a very good class. You know, and that's just a statement from doing this for a long time. I think the last time I looked on three's industry ranking, around 72, 74. It was around 80 until Caden Jones flipped. So that shows you just one kind of big time commit. It's still a 3-star. Previously was a 4-star. We'll note that. But just in the big picture, just pointing out that you can't call it a good class in terms of nationally and things that I'm thinking of there. But you do I have to look at that and say, hey, it's an 8-day window. You know, what did you expect? Did I expect they were going to go pull a bunch of 4 and 5 stars? No. I mean, that's just not happening in that short of a time period. So try to be objective both on that. Yeah, you can't really call it a strong class by any means, but also have to factor in and give credit that it was an 8-day window. And like I just said, you're expecting that class is going to be made up of either guys that were already committed to OSU or guys that were already committed to Eric Morris, North Texas. And that's what we saw. And that's okay. I will also say recruiting classes, how they rank and all that is less important in this day and age than it used to be. It used to be that's your lifeblood, period. Mm-hmm. You know, if you miss on a couple of recruiting classes, you're probably going to be fired for 4 or 5 years down the road. And that's not the case anymore. Yeah. You know, because of the transfer portal, it decreases importance by a lot of a given recruiting class and what that's going to do to affect you long term. So you got to look at the whole thing when you evaluate the class. And something that's been true and will remain true even in this new era is yeah, recruiting rankings, team rankings, all that type of stuff's important, or at least important to what I do. But as far as really judging a class, and I'm going to apply this here, 2-3 years down the road is where you can really say, okay, this was a great class, this was a terrible class, or anywhere in between. Because those guys get on campus this day and age, how many of them are actually going to stay? How many can contribute? So you can look back and say good class, bad class, or whatever. A whole lot easier down the road with benefit of knowing what guys actually ended up producing. And that's the most important part. Me being a guy that's covered recruiting for 27, 28 years, my opinion on it, in the big picture doesn't make any difference at all, or how recruiting analysts rate individual kids or the team or whatever, a class. In the big picture, it doesn't matter. The guys got to get on the field and do what they're going to do, and we'll figure it out later.
Your headliner usually is your quarterback, and that's one of the things I think that Oklahoma State fans are the most excited about is how well Eric Morris has done with quarterbacks. 3-star recruit Broderick Veers. Can you kind of break him down and talk about him?
Yeah, not super high recruited. Was one of the North Texas flips. But I think anybody else who's paid any attention through this process feel like if it's a guy Eric Morris likes at the quarterback position, I'm in. I think right. He's got something to work with. And with Brody, I think that's exactly what he saw. It's a guy that's got the arm talent. Coach Morris has talked about some here lately that the most important thing to him on a quarterback is really processing speed, the ability to see what's going on in the field, what a defense is doing, go through reads, and make a throw is important as arm strength or anything else to him. And, if he's signing a guy, that guy has that. And I think that maybe the only knock you could put on him is he's not particularly tall, 6 foot tall enough. I think Mestamaker at North Texas now is 6'4", more prototypical type quarterback. But there's been a lot of guys in air raids over the years at 6 foot tall that have done really well.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's not the same as a pro style offense where you're going to be looking over huge O linemen and really need to be 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". But yeah, I think OSU fans should be excited about him as a quarterback signee just because Eric Morris thought enough of him to offer him a scholarship and not only have him committed to North Texas, but on to Oklahoma State.
Yeah. So do you think that means
quarterback play at Oklahoma State's been an issue for several years? So, that's kind of generally encouraging across the board.
Do you see this as keeping Drew Mestamaker from coming to OSU? Or do you think he can come on as well?
Not at all.
Yeah.
I think it has no effect. Any established quarterback, generally speaking, is not looking at a recruiting class and say, oh, did they sign a quarterback? That's normal. It's part of the process. And a guy like that's pretty established after the year he's had. He doesn't care one way or the other. And should, and with the portal now, historically, it's always been an issue of keeping quarterbacks, but there was always penalties for a guy who's sitting second string or third string and thinks he needs a better opportunity. He's going to have to sit a year and pay some other prices. All that's gone away. So, even for incoming guys or existing guys, there's options. So don't think that affects things much at all one way or the other.
I think one part of this class, of course, I'm just looking at it from a measurable perspective. I have done no research on it whatsoever. The receivers this year, they just weren't able to create separation. They couldn't just go make plays. So I was kind of looking for that 6'3", 6'4" guy that might be the guy that can just go make a play. Both receivers signed under 6 foot, so kind of Terrell Davis types. So can you evaluate the receivers?
Yeah, one of the guys who was on the OSU verbal commit list up to, I think, Monday. Monday was the day. Julian Wilson out of Owasso, 6'5", 205-pound guy. I don't know what happened there. Maybe I'll find out at some point once Coach gets in and settled. But he's he's one of those guys that was a classic Mike Gundy type recruit. Basketball guy, had focused on basketball his whole life. I think only started playing football last year. Potentially one of a sleeper, a steal, however you want to put that. But he's a 6'5" guy that you're talking about. A couple guys that are under 6 foot. In his case, I don't think he's going to sign now. I think he's going to wait till February. So that could come back around.
Okay.
Give Coach Morris more time to evaluate tape or whatever it was that they felt they didn't have right now could come back around. But as far as the signing class, number one, under 6 foot in the air raid's not necessarily a big deal. Those guys are typically going to be inside receivers, slot types. Mm-hmm. Coach Morris himself, 5'9", and played at Texas Tech, in Stillwater a couple of times. Not something to shy away there, particularly when they're going to be inside receiver types. But your comments on what's there on campus in Stillwater right now is going to point toward they're going to have to hit the portal hard. Mm-hmm. And a couple guys at North Texas that if they get in, Coach Morris is going to go after and have the inside track. It's far from 100% that guys follow their previous head coach to his new destination, but at the same time, it happens a lot. So that's part of the answer there. But just in terms of bodies, the offense Oklahoma State's run the last few years, you're not going to have that many receivers in your depth chart. With the air raid, you're going to need 14, 15.
Yeah.
And so, even outside of the recruiting class, anybody that's coming back from Oklahoma State and anybody that's coming from North Texas, you're still probably looking at the portal to try and pull a few guys there to make you better at the receiver spots.
Yep, absolutely. One thing I can bring the rankings of your recruiting class down is if you sign a whole bunch of linemen, because they typically aren't your 4 or 5 star guys. So, a great lineman could be a high 3-star, right? And at OSU signed 5 offensive linemen. Talk about them.
Actually, just had a post on the message board where I was talking about this. For guys that do what I do, or the guys that are national level analysts and coaches, out of high school players, offensive line is by far the hardest to project and rank or rate or decide to offer on the coach end, because you just don't know. You can look at frame, you can look at footwork, all those types of things. But those guys typically, it's changed a little bit over time, changed at OSU this year kind of by necessity. But you generally don't expect those guys to see the field for 2 to 3 years while they're developing. And that's when you start to figure out, okay, did we evaluate this guy or not? You don't see very many 5-star offensive linemen nationally. When you do, some of those hit, some of them flame out and never do anything. So it just highlights that, it is difficult to evaluate and project at that position. Defensive line's a little bit the same way, a little more physical as opposed to technical footwork, things like that. But those are probably the 2 hardest, and cornerbacks in there somewhere. So, particularly with Coach Morris, particularly with air raid guys in general, they've got a specific skill set they're looking for to run in that offense that doesn't necessarily translate to what other people are looking for, and therefore maybe aren't going to be as highly graded in a lot of cases. So as far as that goes, it's a little bit like quarterback. Insofar as Coach Morris has very specific things he's looking for. And if he's finding those in those guys and they're not high rated 3 stars or 4 stars or higher, you look at it and go, it's worked up for him up to this point. So they're a good fit, or at least a good take to find out if 2-3 years down the road, they're the type of fit you need.
Okay, Braden Presley highlights the defensive recruits from a safety spot. Talk about, it was kind of light on the defense. I would assume the transfer portal, the second go around with the high schoolers, will probably fix all that. And, Skylar Cassidy, we don't know a whole lot about him, so talk about the defensive side of things.
Yeah, I think it was maybe a little light because at least me personally, and I don't know how much Coach Morris has been able to dig into current personnel at OSU. The recruiting class was the priority, with it being a week away basically when he was hired. But I've sat down and done it. There are more guys. This is a battle I fought all season long. I've got people saying there's no good players on this team anywhere.
Right. We need to keep Wendell Gregory and everybody else needs to go. No, that's
something like that. And I'm saying, look, there is talent. Is there a lot? No. Is there enough? Absolutely not. But it's not 105 guys that nobody can play. And I defensively, I felt a little redeemed on that thought with their improvement we saw over the course of the season once Clint Bowen took over. All of a sudden, that's not a bad defense, and there's some guys who can actually play. But just generally speaking, I would say there's more guys you're going to want to keep if you can. They're going to be free to enter the transfer portal as well. More guys on the defensive side of the ball that I look at. I did a top 10 for both sides, wound up on defense, adding a couple of honorable mentions, so 13, 14. And there's some other guys beyond that I would say are probably guys you want to try and keep if you can. Offense was a little harder. I did a straight 10 and didn't look back at it and go, oh, there's a handful who are probably guys you keep around. One exception on that, freshmen who didn't play this year or played very little, kept that 4 games so they could keep a red shirt. Didn't really dig too deep into some of those. Royal Capel on offense, B1 at wide receiver. So that's something maybe I'll take a look at. And they're going to be harder to evaluate because they didn't play. Coach Morris and his staff will have the advantage of practice film. For guys that didn't play a lot in games, they record every practice. They're going to be able to sit down and look at them and say, hey, what do we think here? So it'll be interesting to see how it all stacks out. I think the biggest question going forward is how many guys come from North Texas. Offense, I think you can say there's going to be a few. Mestamaker at quarterback is going to be a huge one. He's going to be one of the top guys in the portal if he enters. Defensively, a little less certain all the way around, but there needs to be an influx of talent there. You didn't necessarily get it from the recruiting class. You don't necessarily look to a recruiting class to find replacement guys for next year. There are guys that can play that early, but you're not really relying on that. These days, it's 100% transfer portal.
So what are you expecting for OSU in the transfer portal period? What are your expectations for that?
I don't know that I can answer really right now because of the two things I just talked about. Retention from the current Oklahoma State squad, which, a popular comment is going to be they were 1-11. You don't want to keep too many, but you have to keep some. You can't just go in and say we have a 15-man recruiting class and everybody else can leave. We're going to do it by the portal. So that's an unanswered question. My guess, counting the 15 incoming with the recruiting class, probably, 25 to 35 guys that are retained. I mean, you had 25 guys walk on senior day, so that's coming off the top no matter what. So that's unanswered question number one is how many guys stay? And we'll point out that Coach Morris may want them to stay, but they decide to go get in the portal anyway.
Yeah.
So we don't know the numbers there. We don't know the numbers of guys that are planning to follow Coach Morris from North Texas. I would think it's going to be a pretty big number, and based on what they've done this year as a team, I don't know that that's a bad thing by any means if there's a pretty big number that come there. But I don't think you have a good handle on what to expect from the portal this year for Oklahoma State until you've got a pretty good idea on both those numbers. And it's going to be a changing number all the way up to January. Okay. Wendell Gregory was a great example. I think that's a guy that's a huge priority to keep, but maybe he meets with Coach Morris sometime and don't hit it off for whatever reason. and he jumps in the portal. That was a guy you were counting on keeping around. And that is purely a hypothetical example. I think Wendell's actually really enjoyed his time in Stillwater. But just an example of a guy that you want to keep around, but you can't really predict. Come January 1st, as he say, well, the portal window opens tomorrow. I'm going to see what my options are. There's that aspect to the whole thing too. So, there's a lot of money involved in the whole situation. Coaches get paid really well, but they've got a lot to deal with on some of that type of stuff that isn't much fun.
Yep. The portal is great, but I've talked to several coaches, and the consensus is you're either getting a player that's looking for a paycheck or getting somebody else's problem. So you need to be careful and not building your whole program on the portal.
Absolutely. And you saw that, I think, with some of the portal class this year for Oklahoma State. Some of the higher rated, more expensive, however you want to phrase it, guys didn't pan out.
Yeah.
Wound up being a problem. Can't think of his name right now, but the safety from Miami was one of the
kicked off right off the bat.
Yeah, and it wasn't a fit. It wasn't a guy that particularly wanted to work real hard to be good, to win a job, and you absolutely have to be concerned with that.
Yeah.
So vetting portal players is probably as big as anything when it comes to the portal and evaluation. Well, you kind of touched on it real well. Is why are they in there?
Yeah.
And I think looking back, that may have been for Mike Gundy a kind of driving factor, and why you saw OSU. And by no means were they the only ones doing this, but looking to the lower levels, looking at G6, looking at FCS, even Division II in some cases. Where you're finding guys who are driven, they've proven something, maybe not at the P4 level, but you've got a lot of tape on them. You can evaluate them there. So at those lower levels, the answer on most of those guys is what are they looking for? They're looking for an opportunity to bump up to the next level.
They're looking for a home. That's the way it was explained to me. Yeah.
What's that?
They're looking for a home. That's the way it was explained to me.
Looking for a home, and also looking for that opportunity to play at the next level. High school kids, that's what they're looking for, whether they're P5 or P4 type players or junior college or D2.
Yeah.
Looking to continue your career and move to the next level. And then there's a chain reaction that happens there too. You've got JUCO's not new. That's been there for a long time, but Division III guys looking to move up to maybe Division II or make the jump to FCS, and just kind of a chain reaction as it goes through there.
Absolutely. Okay, last question here. I've taken a lot of your time, Jeff. Thank you so much. This is very kind of you to do this. Super excited to get to talk to you. You've done a wonderful job. Raj Murdy, this isn't just Eric Morris. It's his staff and specifically the GM. 24-year-old mad scientist who knows nothing other than transfer portal NIL. He studied it. He has a business degree. I think as big as Eric Morris, the home run here is Raj Murdy.
It will play out.
Yes.
I mean, he has done it. Actually, I haven't met the guy yet. Haven't dug real deep in. Read bio, read a news story somebody wrote. But I think really up until this last year in the role as GM for UNT and Coach Morris, he was really actually more on the recruiting end than necessarily the portal. But definitely has the money ball aspect. It's not baseball, so it's different, but a different approach. And how that works at the P4 level, I have said this. For Coach Morris, for Raj, the entire staff, there's going to be a learning curve because the portal does work differently. Revenue share works very differently at the P4 level than it does at the G5, G6 level. Some of the numbers will probably blow their minds as far as going rates in P4 that at North Texas or a similar school, you would never even consider paying a guy that kind of money. Yeah. But the revenue share is going to be bigger, so you got more money to work with. So That will be one of the more interesting parts of it is how that all plays out. And, is he the GM at OSU? I don't know that that's actually been determined yet. I don't claim any insight on that whatsoever. But just how the setup is, and how they work it. And we'll see the results mid-January probably. The portal closes January 16th, I think. Most of the moves are going to happen in that window.
When does it open?
January 2nd.
Okay, so 16th.
So it's a 2-week run for guys to get in. But I think maybe a misconception is, well, the portal window closes and that shuts off transfer activity. No, it doesn't. You just have to get in as a player. You have to get in somewhere in that window. So you could do it January 16th. Okay.
So is there a window to where the signings are, or is that just year round?
Yeah, the signings basically can happen anytime.
Okay.
So long as you went through the formal process of putting your name into the NCAA transfer portal, if you don't find that home, like you mentioned before, if you don't find the one that is what you're looking for, you can stay in as long as you need to. And wait for that opportunity, or get into spring football. You're technically still at your school, but in the transfer portal. It'll be interesting to see how schools handle that.
Yeah,
this guy's looking to leave, but he's still here.
Yeah,
most cases you're not going to see that. Either the kid or the school is going to say, "Well, you're leaving, so you're not here."
Yeah, absolutely.
But technically speaking, you could enter your name in as long as you get it done correctly and officially January 16th, and then stay in it until you find your home. So that portal activity, there's basically kind of two ends of it, of the actual process of getting in and then finding the new home. And that part doesn't have to occur between those dates.
Yeah.
So it's a new world we're living in. I think everybody, even coaches and schools, are figuring out how this all works and how to best go about it on the fly. Because it's been around now for a couple of years, but it's changed. You had 2 dates before, now you got one. It's January instead of December, not one after spring football. So you maybe start to figure it out, and then everything changes again. And I think in the big picture, kind of final commentary, they're gonna have to figure out something better on the timing of everything.
Agreed.
Where we had with the coaching carousel this year, I don't know how you control that really, because you can't really tell schools or coaches, you can't be looking for a job or looking to hire somebody during the season. But the early signing date, that's always, so long as they leave it where it is in early December, that's always going to run into coaching changes, guys leaving jobs, guys taking new jobs, and signing days a few days a week away, a week away. Penn State's case, signing day was yesterday, and they still don't have a coach.
Yeah.
And then the playoff and how long it runs and all that, there's got to be a better way. I wouldn't even begin to claim to tell you what that better way is, but they've got to move the dates around somewhat to figure things out to where it all works better. Because right now it's not working real well and is real tough on a lot of people.
It is. And this is why I had no problem with the transfer portal, because the adults, the coaches have been doing this stuff in terms of transferring forever. The players should be able to as well. And I'll say this for my commentary, you don't have to comment on this. I thought the Grant Seagram deal, where he was openly in the transfer portal, I thought he handled that with total class. When you lose your coach, the school pulls the rug out from underneath you. You have the right to do that. He handled that with class. I thought the Noah McKinney situation was absolute garbage. So that's just, and whenever he was openly recruiting with other schools, I didn't mind him getting the transfer portal, but don't shove it in my face with your open recruiting for other schools in the Big 12.
Well, technically in that case, he was still going to play just like Seagram did.
Yeah.
but was very actively in Seagram's case. I don't think that guy.
Agreed.
He's got an agent, and that guy's fielded calls, but I don't think he put much thought or effort into it. And there was a different situation there. Demarion Thomas is another one I'll mention. He was a guy who shut it down. He opted out of this season after 4 games because he had a redshirt year available. Did not enter the portal, said Oklahoma State's where he wants to be, but given the coach he signed up to play for is not the coach anymore, I'm going to take that red shirt and get that extra year back. Yes. Hopefully at Oklahoma State, that's kind of the approach he had early on. And you can't fault a guy for that because now it is a business all the way around. So that's a business decision. Hoss Haney not coming back after his injury, same deal.
Yeah,
he didn't have a true regular red shirt available, but did have a medical possibly. Well, if he sets foot back on the field for one play, after missing so many games all year with the foot injury, he can't apply for a medical anymore. So it's a business decision. Don't fault any of those guys for making a business decision like that.
100%. Jeff Johnson, again, I've taken a whole bunch of your time. I promised you 20 minutes. I've gone more than double of that. So you are so kind to join OState Daily. Thank you so much. And one last time, tell everybody where they can find you.
OStateIllustrated.com, or you can go to On3, navigate to fan sites and the Oklahoma State site, and we'll get you there.
Jeff Johnson, thank you so much. Go Pokes.
You bet. Thanks a lot.